The first challenging Caribbean airport we will visit is Saba. Saba has the distinction of having the shortest commercial air service runway in the entire world. The most frequently used runway for landings and takeoffs is 12. The landing distance from the displaced threshold is about 1,000 feet. The takeoff distance on runway 12 is about 1,300 feet. The permanent bent in this tree shows the obvious usual direction of the wind. Strong winds are typical here and add to the challenge of operating in and out of this small airport. Straight ahead of us is 3,000 foot above sea level Mount Scenery. Saba is a scuba diver's paradise. When we get to the airport, take a good look at the old terminal building. With all its character and charm, it'll soon be history as it's being replaced with a new modern facility. Well, let's land at Saba.
My name is Roland Hullum, airport manager from Saba. I've been at the airport now for about 20 years, plus minus, 21 years in January. And right now we're going through different phases with the taking down of the banks and everything, so we can get more safer flights in here, and hopefully in February we should be starting the new terminal building, which will take approximately about 8 months to complete.
You're probably looking forward to that.
Very much, very much.
They were saying that the roof, the last hurricane, George, took care of the roof of this terminal.
Blew off, but also the tower area. That's why we have a small tower erected here into the terminal building right now. The airport here opened in '63, and so far we have a safety record. We don't have any casualties or any crashes, anything like that. So we've been doing good pretty far with the size and the length of the runway we have, which is only 1,312 feet, which is approximately the size of an aircraft carrier. But we do good. The pilots at Win Air, they're some of the best that we have around. So yeah, the cutting down and the removal of the soil and everything, it's opened up the landing area more so they can feel the south winds much better. So well, let's hope that that's enough for right now, because it's kind of costly.
Right.
We don't have the monies for that.
Well, thank you.
You're most welcome, sir.
Welcome to the challenging airport at St. Bartholomew, commonly called St. Bart's. Runway 1028 is 2,100 feet in length. We are looking at runway 10. Takeoffs are prohibited from runway 28 due to the high terrain. All four main roads in this small island intersect here. When there is a momentary lull in aircraft movements, the aviation observer can enjoy watching the auto and motor scooter traffic trying to sort itself out here in this traffic circle. Welcome to this small but delightful two-nation island. The runway at Juliana, 0927, is about 7,100 feet in length. While this is a huge runway for an Islander or a Twin Otter, it is a minimum length runway for wide-body aircraft such as 747s. Let's go to the Maho Beach end to watch activity on runway 09. At the Maho Beach end of the airport, signs warn of the dangers of jet exhaust. A plus in the Caribbean is being able to watch older aircraft like this Convair liner. Welcome to Cyril King Airport on the island of St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Runway 1028 at this airport is 7,000 feet in length. Just to the left of this runway you can see a portion of the old runway that was about 4,600 feet long. In addition to the challenges of high terrain in the airport vicinity, there are tricky winds at this airport encountered on approaches to runway 10. The winds can include a mountain wave effect. This is the airport serving Tortola in the British Virgin Islands. Runway 0725 is 3,600 feet in length with water at both ends. Besides high terrain, another major factor in Beef Island being considered a challenging airport is wind conditions. It is not uncommon for a flight deck crew to encounter winds from 3 different directions during the approach and landing to Beef Island Airport. Next, let's go to Virgin Gorda in the British Virgin Islands. Runway 0220 is about 3,000 feet in length. It is paved only for short distances at each end. High terrain at each end of the runway necessitates special approach and landing procedures. Winds are another component of the challenge of operating in and out of this airport, with strong crosswinds being quite the norm here. Pilots also report having to dodge large water puddles on the unpaved portion of the runway when landing and taking off during and after rainstorms. Let's come in over high terrain and land on Virgin Gorda runway 02. You're looking at the high terrain we just flew over in making the approach and landing to Virgin Gorda runway 02.
We've just flown in and out of Virgin Gorda a couple times today. What's your what's it like flying in there? You obviously have to use some skill to counteract the wind and so forth.
That's correct. It doesn't take a rookie to go in there. It needs some skills. You got the constant crosswind, and runway's about 2,900 feet. Basically, you have to compensate for the hill being so close to the approach end of the runway. And it just takes practice.
Some of the other places you've flown into, like St. Bart's, you tend to have a headwind. You don't tend to have the crosswinds there. Is that right?
That's correct. St. Bart's a little shorter. There's probably a more steeper cliff closer to the runway, but you don't have to fight the crosswind, constant crosswind. So they're comparable.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Maybe 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, seatbelts on, please. Be 5 minutes up and down.
Next, we head far south in the Caribbean to E.T. Joshua Airport on the island of St. Vincent. The runway at St. Vincent is 0725, which is 4,650 feet in length. Considering that the largest aircraft serving this airport with scheduled passenger flights are Dash 8s, the length is certainly sufficient. Due to high terrain, all landings are made over the water to runway 07. And all passenger airline flights depart in the opposite direction using runway 25. Typically, there are strong headwinds for landings on runway 07 and strong tailwinds for takeoffs on runway 25. It is interesting with strong tailwinds to watch even aircraft such as Islanders and Aero Commanders using much of the runway length for takeoff. Dash 8s also use much more of runway 25 when taking off with a typical tailwind than would otherwise be the case with a headwind. Welcome to Mustique in the Grenadines, a favorite island of the rich and famous. The airport at Mustique Island has high terrain at both ends of runway 0927. The runway is about 3,000 feet in length. On takeoffs on runway 09, most all flights make an immediate right turn to avoid the higher terrain at the end of the runway. No takeoffs are made on runway 27 due to the terrain at the end of this runway. Some pilots mentioned the large communication tower that is close to the approach path and is another factor in making this a challenging airport, especially in less than ideal weather conditions. Next, we fly to Union Island, our southernmost destination in the Grenadines. The Union Island Airport has runways 0826, which is about 3,000 feet in length. All landings and takeoffs are made using runway 08. On approach, we flew over this terrain. Due to this terrain, takeoffs are not permitted on runway 26. Union Island has a new terminal building along with a new runway and taxiways. You can see the old 1,600-foot runway on this diagram. The new runway is about twice as long as the old 1,600-foot runway. You can see the 08 end of the old runway just to the left of the white X. Here you can see the 26 end of the old runway just to the left of the white X. Next, let's go to the island of St. Lucia in the West Indies and the George F. L. Charles Airport at Castries. This airport previously was named VG Airport. The world-famous Pitons are about 90 minutes driving time from here. Some of the history of this airport, when it was named VG, is shown from this photo exhibit in the terminal building. Photos of airliners from the earlier days of aviation include Pan Am DC-6s, shown here prior to the runway being lengthened. This looks like a secluded beach, but it's actually right across the road from the terminal building at George Charles Airport. The runway here is 0927, which is 6,200 feet in length. We are looking down runway 27, which has a 1,000 foot displaced threshold. Runway 09 has about a 400 foot displaced threshold. With parallel roads so close to the runway here at George Charles, there's a sign asking motorists on Nelson Mandela Drive to dim their lights for aircraft landing. Because of high terrain in the immediate vicinity of this airport, aircraft taking off on runway 09 have a curved departure route. When winds are from the opposite direction and aircraft are landing on runway 27, they have a curved approach path. Let's next go to the airport on Culebra Island off the coast of Puerto Rico. Runway 1331 at Culebra is about 3,000 feet in length. We are looking at the high terrain from the 31 end of the runway. Captain Facundo will review the approach through the cut or over the mountain to runway 13.
But everybody does an overhead that's going to come
About
through the cut.
1,000 feet.
About 1,000 feet after they pass the antenna, then they start, putting down either the wheels if it's retractable, or the flaps down, and then they go to 600 feet downwind and come in about 400 feet through the cut, and there they cut the engines and just dive down at full flaps, and they have about a 500 foot mark, and they should touch down there. If not, they should go around.
It's a go around, probably without hesitating.
Exactly. Like today, that's completely from the north. The pilots prefer to come through the channel here, through the bay,
Right.
which is 31. And then the special event is when the wind is really crossed from the northeast, a lot of pilots prefer to come over the mountain there, which is called Tamarindo Approach, and they just, I mean,
What kind of approach is it called?
It's called Tamarindo Approach, because there's an island that's named Tamarindo. They
Okay.
go right under over it, and they really dive down at about 80 knots or something like that, and it's awesome to see it because it's really, it's almost 90 degrees nose down. And,
So that takes a lot of skill to get those wheels on the runway.
oh
there.
yeah, oh yeah. It
Bending
takes
the
a lot
wind
of
and-
skill. It's the practice, really. Most of the pilots that land here, they land 5, 6, 7 times every day, so they're experienced.
Because they're doing short flights here to San Juan. and back.
Exactly, and they're flying to Vieques and Culebra, San Juan, so they're experienced.
Let's make a return visit to Juliana International at St. Martin. Today we'll land on runway 27.
Juliana, it's Leo November 972, good afternoon again. Leo 972, good afternoon, go ahead, sir. Yes, sir, ready for engine startup. 972, startup with approved, temperature 3729089, wind 24008, runway 27 for departure.
Juliana International is in the midst of major improvements. For example, a new ramp area for large jetliners has been completed, and buses take passengers to and from their aircraft. Juliana International is now in the final stages of planning for a new $90 million terminal building. This exhibit shows the proposed runway extension on a deck over the water at the Maho Beach end of the airport to bring runway 0927 to a new length of about 7,800 feet. However, this has not been approved by the appropriate authorities. A new control tower was in the final stages of completion in mid-2003. In 2003, we did not see the ramp congestion that we had seen at the end of the last century at Juliana, but we also did not see the multiple wide-body aircraft, including 747s, that we had seen land and take off each afternoon at St. Martin. Air France has replaced its daily 747 with an Airbus A340-300 that provides non-stop service both to and from Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport. One piece of good news is that what is probably the best place in the world to observe airliner activity, the Sunset Beach Bar on Maho Beach, is still going strong. Every aviation enthusiast should have this on their must-do list of places to visit. Let's return to St. Bart's, one of the most challenging airports in the Caribbean and a great place to observe aircraft landings and takeoffs at close range. Today the wind is in the opposite direction of what it was in our last visit. Today landings are on runway 28, but as always, regardless of the wind, takeoffs are on runway 10. This sign in 2 languages discourages people from standing at the end of the runway on the beach. We debated whether to even include this point, as this is a French island and the attitude is very European. We decided to include it so that aviation enthusiasts would not be surprised when they visit this airport and the adjacent beach. This program was digitally filmed over a 5-year period. Because of the time span, it shows aviation history in terms of airlines that have shut down, merged, or changed names, and also shows aircraft changes over that time period, for example, 747s versus A340s. We also saw changes over time, such as the new tower at Juliana and the new large terminal addition at St. Bart's. Are we saying that challenging airports are not safe airports? The answer is emphatically no. While there have been accidents, such as the one shown here, in the vast majority of cases they have involved private planes and pilots. Air carrier flights have excellent safety records, including flights into each and every one of the airports included in this program.